It's time for the Newsmaker Show on News Talk AM 1480 WLEA.
Brian O'Neill, always glad to have on with us an assemblyman who represents Greenwood, Jasper, Woodhull, Alfred, Elman, and many other areas too, of a pretty sizable district. Always glad to have on with us Assemblyman Joe Giglio. Assemblyman wanted to talk about the good news for Hornell. Hospital CEO Jen Sullivan and Mayor Sean Hogan announced it last Friday. $54.9 million coming in from the State Department of Health to help build a new facility for a new St. James in North Hornell.
Oh, look, it is very exciting news. It is nice to see, state dollars coming into our part of the state of New York. As I've said before, these hospitals are in great need of some help, and it's again fortunate that we're getting there. They're operating. We're hoping that this kind of dollars will help stabilize them for the long term and keep providing services to the communities that need it most. So it's very good and exciting news.
And not to go from the happy to the sad, but last time you were on, you talked about the heroin task force that came out of the State Assembly, a report that you were heavily involved with as you were the chairman of that task force in the Assembly.
We did, as the Republican conference in the Assembly, a study, and we had 7 different locations for our forums. But Phil Palmisano, Assemblyman Palmisano, represented us at Penn Yan. And basically, we have been working with the senators, and including Senator O'Mara, who sponsored that one, on a different way to approach the problem. As you said, there's 2 different major components. One, there's a criminal component to that kind of drug use, but the other side is that the epidemic has grown so far. How do we, once we get people into some help, how do we keep them there, and how do we prevent them from reoccurring? And so that's what we've been dealing with and now it's budget time, so we're working with the Senate not only on some legislation, but also on some stuff that would allow detox, rehab, and recovery to be expanded, and to use our state agencies that are already doing this work, maybe finding more money and more revenue in the budget for them so they can expand their services. And speaking on behalf of our conference in the Assembly, we have looked at extending detox for more than 3 days. We have found that to be one of the things, get them immediately to rehab, and then recovery. What we found is there aren't enough beds in the state of New York currently, and the biggest problem we found is there's no clearinghouse of information so that people know where to go when they need help. And that's one of the things we're hoping to address with the health department, with mental health, and with OASIS. So what we're looking at there is maybe an advocacy office, a 1-800 number you could call, so that when you take your loved one to the hospital and hopefully they start to recover, you have somebody to guide you through the maze of places that can help and find you that help immediately. So those are one of the key things we're looking at. And again, we'll be working with the Senate to hopefully accomplish some of that in this year's budget, and then we'll continually work with the New York State Department and the not-for-profits to expand care.
I saw a U.S. Senate hearing, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand talking about the problems of heroin, and I'm sure you've heard similar stories. She talked about a news story out of her home area, which is the state capital region, Albany area, and she spoke of this young man who got into heroin after high school, and before that his life was going great, and then everything spiraled and continued to spiral, and he finally died of a heroin overdose. No lack of news lately about people dying in that way. What are your thoughts about this new anti-heroin overdose drug? I think it's called naloxone, that's going to be available soon in all pharmacies.
Right. What she told you about, what we found from the addicts that testified in front of our forums, is that most of them started out by either having a root canal and or a sports injury. They were prescribed opiates by the end of the prescription, and when it was cut off, they were hooked, and they turned to heroin. What you were talking about, the brand name is called Narcan, and that can immediately save your life. And now it's becoming available in more places. That's a good thing that the first responders and people can have their life saved. But it is in some cases it provides a false sense of security that there is a panacea and that there's a fail-safe that it won't be fatal. The problems become that there's two problems with it. Is that first, when it does save your life, which is absolutely a good thing, and if you're in a hospital, when your vitals become normal, you're still hooked on heroin. And so the release part, and that's when we need to find them help. That's the critical area, to find them help immediately. The second thing is, again, I think it gives some addicts a false sense of security that no matter what, they're going to be saved. And unfortunately, either the first responders and or the people they thought were going to be able to help them are too late. So although it is a good drug and it's a very vital part of fighting this addiction and saving lives, it isn't a cure-all by any stretch of the imagination.
Assemblyman Giglio, you have a pretty big knowledge of this. What is it called, Narcan?
Yes, sir.
There was a news story on how it was going to be available in all pharmacies. The news story was it was originally available to the big chain pharmacies like CVS and Walgreens, and now it's available to all pharmacies. Wondering, and just curious, is this the kind of drug that can be distributed by, let's say, the parents of addicts or family members who had an addict in the house in case someone overdosed then, or is this only distributed by medical professionals?
No, they're offering it to the general public, and you still have to be trained on how to use it, and there have been different workshops and people offering the training, and it isn't just for till now it's been just for professionals, but now they're expanding it in an effort to, again, save more lives and get them the help they need as fast as they can.
Talking with Assemblyman Joe Giglio, who's got an interesting background. He's a state assemblyman who used to be in law enforcement. Assemblyman Giglio, and we've been talking about heroin so far. Methamphetamines, that is another big problem in, I guess, the entire state and the entire country.
Well, Brian, you could not be more right. Unfortunately, meth is in some cases equally as terrible as heroin is. And when we talk about detox and rehab and those kind of things, what we're looking for, again, with an advocacy office, is counselors and places to get you treated on all of these kind of addictions. Heroin and opiates are right now the biggest killer, but meth is just a scourge also. So what we're looking at is a whole approach to the whole drug problem, and when we do that, we're looking at the approach to the whole person. We need to get them help as quick as we can, get them into rehab, and then long-term recovery. And this meth thing is because, again, they can make it themselves. It's been awful, and that's in some of our areas. The law enforcement has done a great job of discovering the meth labs and stuff like that, and has done a great job of enforcing those laws. The problem still becomes, you can't arrest your way out of all these problems, so why we're trying, when we identify these folks, we're trying to get them help as quick as we can.
Assemblyman Giglio, another problem, meth lab fires, that's happened in a number of local towns, and what a situation to be in. Somebody gets into the world of drug addiction, and the next thing you know, there's a fire at their house.
You're again, Brian, exactly right. And the problem with the labs is you're putting a lot of innocent people at risk. Those that may be in the same residence as you, those next to you, your neighbors, the first responders having to respond, not knowing what's inside the residence or the dwelling. These things tend to perpetuate themselves and get even more serious as you deal with that. I mean, you can be completely innocent and the fire's in your neighborhood. And so these are the things that are very tough on law enforcement. Is they try to protect everybody and keep everybody safe. It's one of those things where you're fighting an uphill battle.
Assemblyman Joe Giglio, wondering your thoughts on the Senator Mike Nozzolio bill that would make stiffer penalties against those who make threats against police officers. I believe that the reason behind that is people posting things online, threats, venting, angry things against officers.
Part of the problem is when you are in law enforcement and you're identified, you put yourself at risk, and that's something we sign up for. But you don't want to put your family or any of your loved ones at risk at the same time, nor should you be subject to threats because you're doing you're protecting the public.
That's a big danger today. I think that's the kind of thing people could accidentally get into. They start typing and they get mad and they get madder and they get madder and they start venting, and the next thing you know, they've said more than they intended to online.
Sure it does. And I had a question, Brian, not too long ago when people said, we have enough laws, and why do you guys, pass new ones? And, and one of the subjects that we brought up when I had this conversation was cyberspace and the Internet. Because now there's a whole new opening in front of things that didn't occur 20, 30 years ago. So now, like you just said, everything is recorded. You can be suspicion cast on you without any recourse to defend yourself. You can be threatened not knowing where the threat comes from. So you need these kind of laws to protect, again, those who are serving us, and not just law enforcement, but to protect the average citizen from some malicious attack that is unwarranted. And people, and you can't just have a place where anything goes and it's anarchy and you can say or do anything on the net. You need some defense against it, and until we progress to that point, it's kind of a free-for-all out there.
Talking with New York State Assemblyman Joe Giglio. More in just a moment. Back on the Newsmaker show, I'm Brian O'Neill. The last time Assemblyman Joe Giglio was on the show, we talked about his heroin task force and the report that came out from that. Wondering if you can tell us, Assemblyman, have you gotten a lot of feedback from the general public, law enforcement, people involved with fighting heroin addiction about the report that you issued?
Yes, we did, and it's been very gratifying because a lot of the feedback has been very positive about the comprehensiveness of our approach and the fact that we have made it very broad, and we have talked about solutions plus how to fund these solutions. So we like to think is a very complete report that covered almost every aspect of the addiction problem and how to recover from it, how to treat it. And as you said, and you've alluded to earlier, the epidemic seems to have no end to it right now. So we're trying very hard to make sure, our report did, that we covered enough ground, and our approach was to identify as much of the problem as possible. But our next approach was to break it down and prioritize it, and then find the funding levels for it to try to get there. And one of the things is labeling addiction a disease, and again, finding recovery and having an advocacy office and a place where you can get the information you need, because, again, as a parent or a loved one of somebody with an addiction problem, most of the time we don't know where to turn. And that's part of what we're doing. The other part will be, the education component, where we have found out, again, from the people that testified, that we should probably be in the schools at around the third grade, but when we get to the higher levels of school, we need more peer-to-peer intervention than having just us go in there and tell them it is bad. So those are some of the more interesting things we found through our report, and we're working at different levels to try to get to those points. Another thing in the legislative portion of it, and how to approach that is how you measure the drugs, how you weigh the drugs, how you can charge with that, and And so there's and one of the most important components is we're putting in we're hoping to get a civil component, civil law passed where your loved one can intervene and get you the help and keep you in a hospital and in detox and rehab until you're better, without you being able to sign yourself out. So there's a lot of, as I said, it's been a multifaceted approach, and we're proud of it, and the feedback's been great, but we still have to get a lot done in the budget process. And then over priorities, we've got long-term goals too, and so we're just starting.
One of the things that came out of your report, and it's been at numerous hearings where families have complained, and we touched on this earlier, that medical insurance is not covering a lot of heroin treatments. Wondering, Assemblyman Giglio, do you know why that is, that heroin companies don't want to pay out for heroin treatment as part of insurance plans?
Well, I think the insurance companies are probably a little bit behind the times as far as the epidemic goes, and I think they're looking at this addiction and the meth type things in a prism that's probably a little steeped in the past. Our argument to them will be, you have to improve this. You have to give us a little bit more time, and we think that if you do it the way we're suggesting, that you won't have the recidivism that you have now. If you only give them 3 days, or you try to do everything outpatient, that person has a tendency to have their problem reoccur. It is our hope that if we can get them the treatment they need initially, you won't have those relapses into the drug world. And if we can treat them as fast as possible, and again, get them the help we need, and then get to the long-term recovery portion of it, where they're still being counseled and they're treated, but they're working in and things like that, that we won't, again, have the lapse. So in essence, we think that it'll save the insurance companies money instead of costing them more money, because they're doing it over and over and over again for the same people. So we're hoping to convince them that that's the right thing to do, and that they will save money in the long run. I think their model is probably, like I said earlier, dated, and they need to upgrade it and to update it.
Wondering the changes that you and other legislators would like to see from insurance companies. Is that something that could come from Albany lawmakers like yourself, or is this something more at the federal level? Because insurance companies, while they're in every state, would that come from like a Congressman Tom Reed, Senator Chuck Schumer, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand? Well,
I think what you're seeing is a joint effort. We're concentrating on the state of New York and looking at a model that we hope will work. And the feds are doing the same thing. I think that Tom Reed has studied the problem and has worked very diligently to help solve it, and the same with the senators. This is a universal problem that is not partisan in any way, shape, or form, and so we're hoping to find, as we keep trying, the best ways to do it. And on the federal level, they were talking about some more money to help us at these levels to get there. So this will be a joint effort between all levels of government, to the counties and the locals. But at this point, we're all in this together, and we all need to work together to move forward and start saving as many lives as we can, and reclaim these people for the good of society, because we've lost way too many.
Assemblyman Giglio, before we go, wanted to ask you, you got the state budget coming up. Did you have any thoughts on that topic?
I do. We're still dealing in the education portion, and we're looking at different things like, again, gap elimination, which we want to. We were hoping to clear up last year, and we'd like to finish it off this year. We're looking at foundation aid for our school districts to get them, again, in a position to continue to operate and to provide sound quality education for our kids. We're looking at infrastructure. Again, speaking of Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who has worked very hard on the CHIPS portion of the budget and continues to fight for infrastructure, a key for all of us here in the southern part of the state, because infrastructure helps us grow jobs and opportunity. So those are the kind of things that are out there that are so important to us here. And so we've got, again, a good team working on these things And those are part of the budget process in the next month that we're going to, a little less than a month now, that we're hoping to include in the budget, increases for those kind of things and to get education whole again after the solving of the gap elimination and then switching, helping them get more foundation aid.
He represents, in our area, Alfred, Elman, Woodhull, Greenwood, Jasper, West Union. Assemblyman Joe Giglio, he's got a pretty big district and very interesting background, worked in law enforcement on some very interesting committees. Assemblyman Joe Giglio, it's always great having you on.
Thank you, Brian. It's always a pleasure. I enjoy talking to you.
And ABC is next here on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.